for joining today's discussion about opportunities for New Hampshire small businesses to support NASA programs, hosted by Senator Jeanne Shaheen and NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. We have an exciting and full agenda today, so I'll quickly go through some housekeeping remarks before turning the event over to our moderator, Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Please note this event is being recorded. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the Q&A box and select all panelists in the drop-down. With your questions, please include your name, company, and panelists you wish to address. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session after the presentations and read by a moderator. All attendee participants will be on mute for the duration of the event, and a link to these slides will be emailed to all who have RSVP'd for today's event. Today, we are honored to have Senator Jeanne Shaheen moderate our event. She is the first woman in U.S. history to be elected both a governor and a United States senator. Senator Jeanne Shaheen has served in the Senate since 2009 and is a member of the Senate Committees on Armed Services, Foreign Relations, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, the Select Committee on Ethics, and Commerce, Justice, Science, and Appropriations, which funds NASA. Senator Shaheen's leadership has led the way for numerous programs that support innovation and create opportunities for small businesses. She's a strong and consistent supporter of NASA and its missions. And now I would like to introduce our host and moderator, Senator Jeanne Shaheen.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning. I'm so excited to have Administrator Jim Bridenstine back talking to New Hampshire small businesses, and we're very pleased to have some of his best and brightest at NASA with us. Jenn Gustetic, who is the head of the SBIR, STTR programs, and Glenn Delgado, who is the Associate Administrator for Small Businesses at NASA. And Glenn is also a UNH grad, so we are excited that he is on the call as well. We are also very pleased to have Bob Kline-Schoder from Creare, who is going to be talking about some of the work that Creare does. And I would remind folks that Creare is the company that worked with Senator Warren Rudman in creating the SBIR program, and they just got a sizable grant in May to work with NASA. So congratulations, Bob. I haven't seen you since you got the award. We also are very pleased to have Dr. Harlan Spence, who is the director, got too many administrators and directors this morning, who is the director of the Earth, Oceans, and Space program at the University of New Hampshire, which has done such terrific work and such great work with NASA. And Dr. Spence was pleased to host Administrator Bridenstine and myself last summer in person to see some of the great programs that the University of New Hampshire is working on after they got one of the biggest grants ever from NASA to a university. So we're delighted that he is also joining us this morning. And I think for all of you who are on the call, and we have 100 people, 100 businesses signed up today to participate in today's webinar, but I think most of you on the call know New Hampshire's history in space, and it's really a storied history that I think a lot of the rest of the country doesn't appreciate. Of course, Alan Shepard, the first American in space, is from Derry, New Hampshire. We have our planetarium and space museum named after Alan Shepard, and we have businesses that have been involved in so many space missions over the years. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, they had sensors from RDF, a company in Hudson, that were part of that space mission and also part of the spacesuits that they wore on the moon. So we have businesses who have been working with NASA involved in space for decades in New Hampshire, and it's a very important part of our economy. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited to see so many of you on the call today, to hear from Administrator Bridenstine, to hear from the folks at NASA about how we can better participate with NASA in the exciting initiatives that are underway. And as you heard in the introduction, I am the ranking member on the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Subcommittee. So we work very closely with NASA and are watching the project to get a manned space mission again in the 2024 is the goal for that. And we're actually hoping to have a woman as part of that mission. So for me, that's very exciting. So again, thank you all very much for joining us. I'm happy now to introduce Administrator Bridenstine, former congressman from Oklahoma, who is, I think, probably the most enthusiastic person in the administration about the opportunities that we have at NASA and in space, and has really ushered in a renewal in enthusiasm about what we can do through our space programs, and a lot of excitement among young people about space. So thank you so much, Jim, for joining us this morning.
Yes, ma'am. And Senator Shaheen, thank you for all of your wonderful support throughout the years. A lot of people saw us launch American astronauts for the first time. I think it was 2011 now, so 9 years ago. And that was made possible by the support that we have in the House and the Senate, and of course, you being the ranking member on the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Committee. Critical to have your support, and we're so grateful for all that you've done for our little agency that does these stunning achievements. And of course, now, as you said, we're going back to the moon. This time we intend to stay on the moon. And as you said, we don't just want to go back to the moon with the next man. We want to go with the first woman. And I know, Senator Shaheen, I know that's important to you, and it's important to a lot of people across the country and across the globe. And nobody is more excited about that than my 12-year-old daughter. And so this is a great opportunity. We have a very diverse, highly qualified astronaut corps today that, quite frankly, didn't exist back in the 1960s. So things are different. And this time when we go to the moon, we get to go with all of America. I'm also excited, as you mentioned, Glenn Delgado is with us, who is a proud graduate of the University of New Hampshire. And I know everybody's looking forward to hearing from him. You should know, for the New Hampshire enthusiasts out there, Glenn came to NASA back in, I think, 2007. And during that time, NASA was not really good with small business. I'm just going to be honest. Of course, this is what I read. I see the Small Business Administration scorecards. That's what I see. And under Glenn Delgado's leadership, he took us from a C back in 2007. And when he came on board, he brought us up to an A. And he's been very consistent. I know, Senator Shaheen, you have been a champion of small business. And of course, that's what this forum today is all about. And so we're thrilled to be able to say, look, we're doing big things in space. We're looking forward to doing more big things in space. And it's not going to happen unless we have the great support of New Hampshire, which we do with all of our small businesses. And it's not going to happen without the support of universities like the University of New Hampshire. I think fondly back about a year ago when we visited the University of New Hampshire, and not just, you see it on paper, the great work they do, but when you actually visit and you see the hardware and you see the scientists and you see the students that are engaged with both the engineers and the scientists and learning, those are that's the workforce of the future. So New Hampshire and small business and universities, all of that is going to be critical for our missions going forward. Real quick, I'll just give some statistics. There are currently 15 small businesses in New Hampshire that are already engaged in the Artemis program. We're currently, as an agency, we spend about $3 billion annually in prime contracts to small businesses, and we spend about $3 billion annually to subcontractors that are small businesses. So we are keenly focused on small businesses. Again, that's happening because of the great work of Glenn Delgado, who's coming up shortly. But New Hampshire is leading the way in so many of these areas. Senator Shaheen, your support has been critical to that being possible, and we look forward to working with you as we move forward. So I'll turn it back over to you, Senator. I'll be here to answer questions at the end, but I know there's a lot of really good panelists, and people want to hear from them. So thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Administrator. Again, we're delighted that you're with us this morning. And I'm really pleased to be able to introduce next Dr. Bob Kline-Schoder, who is the president of Creare. Creare is located in the Upper Valley in New Hampshire, and it is one of those businesses, as I said, that was very involved in the inception of the Small Business Innovation Research Program. They have been very successful at getting SBIR grants, and I have had the opportunity to visit there a couple of times, and I'm always so impressed with the innovation that's going on there. So, Bob, we're so pleased that you could join us this morning and talk about some of the work that you're doing with NASA.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. I appreciate the opportunity that you and the administrator have provided today to be able to participate in this event, given Creare's and New Hampshire's long history with the SBIR program. As you can see on my first slide, and as you mentioned, Creare's president has actually worked at the time with Senator Warren Rudman on the SBIR program's founding legislation. Last week, I actually found a letter from Warren Rudman to our president at the time, letting him know that the legislation had passed and that it was one of his Warren Rudman's first pieces of legislation that actually went through the Senate. So we're very excited about that. We're very excited about the history that New Hampshire senators have had in this program. Most recently, you, Senator Shaheen, have been such a great advocate to help make this really good program even better over the years. As you can see, we were an early participant in the program since we kind of knew that it happened at the time. And we've been working ever since to help transition and develop technologies that would benefit both our organization, the corporation, as well as our nation. Most of our growth since 1982 actually can be traced to the SBIR program. At that time, we were about 50 people. Today, we're 150 people, and we continue to grow, even through times like we have today. We've been able to have commercialization and transition successes in many different areas, everything from computational fluid dynamics software, threaded fasteners, cryogenic refrigerators, miniature vacuum pumps, aircraft carrier systems for catching and launching the aircraft off of the aircraft carriers, as well as doing high precision laser metrology for inspecting the Joint Strike Fighter. I'm going to take a few minutes now and give a little more detail about a couple of those specific applications. If you go to the next slide. The first one that Creare has worked very closely with NASA on is the development of cryogenic refrigerators. This again goes back to early 1980s when NASA realized that they had a need for cryogenic refrigerators for many of their applications. Cryogenic refrigerators basically are like the refrigerator in your house. They just get a heck of a lot colder. And they're used to cool instruments that were used to do deep space imaging. In 2002, we actually had one of our systems launched on the shuttle, as you can see in the bottom right picture there, and it was brought up to the Hubble Space Telescope and retrofit to cause a new instrument that was dormant, or an old instrument that was dormant, to be able to be used again to allow another 6 or 7 years worth of science to be performed on the Hubble Space Telescope. Next slide, please. Another area where Creare and NASA have collaborated is in the development of miniature vacuum pumps. We've worked with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as well as NASA Goddard in order to develop these systems. About 15 years ago, NASA decided they wanted to send very precise chemical measurement systems to the surface of other planets, and that they required one of these small systems, small vacuum pumps, in order to do that, and they could not buy it commercially. They couldn't find it anyplace else. And so they teamed with Creare to develop one. And today we have 2 of our systems on the Mars Science Laboratory sitting on the surface of Mars today. There's one in the European Space Agency ExoMars mission, which is hopefully going to be launched fairly soon. And we're also working with the team at NASA Goddard on the Dragonfly mission that's going to Titan to put 2 vacuum pumps on that system as well. All of these applications are to make precise chemical measurements on the surface of these planets. And when you hear the results of there's methane, there's no methane, or any of those things that come out of NASA, it's because they were able to take gas, flow it through our vacuum pumps, and make those measurements that they needed to make. Next slide, please. Another area where NASA and Creare have teamed has been in the development of life support systems for the astronauts. Most of this work has been done with Houston Space Flight Center. The area that we've most recently been concentrating on and where we're developing a system to be tested for the future is for the exploration spacesuit system to control and cool the oxygen that is used for the astronauts to be able to survive the harsh environment that they work in. It's a critical life support system for the astronaut, and our system enables a more capable, lighter weight exploration spacesuit system. Our system and the ESS are planned for use on all of these missions, the Gateway, Moon, and Mars missions that are going to be manned in the future. And the last slide, please. Most recently, Creare has also been Artemis program and the human landing system. We're teamed with small and large businesses over across 17 states. And what we're developing, again, is a cryogenic refrigerator. In this case, it's not being used to cool an instrument. It's being used to manage cryogenic propellants, such as liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. And what we are using this technology for is to enable the storage, transfer, and liquefaction of these cryogens up on the surface of the moon and also in the orbit around the moon. One of the things that this project does, it expands our technical portfolio for manned space missions, and it shows how Creare is becoming a visible part of the supply chain for national space missions. I hope that I was able to provide a little bit of background on how the NASA SBIR program has been leveraged to help not only Creare and our products and our growth, but also national missions. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thanks very much, Bob. We're really pleased that you could join us, and it's very exciting to hear what Creare is working on and the potential for it to help with space exploration and what NASA is doing. I'm just going to take a break again and turn it back to the moderator because she wanted to announce some housekeeping details for those of you who signed on late. So I'll turn it back to you, Daphne.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We know that some folks have joined us late. Just wanted to remind you about the Q&A for this event. There is a Q&A box on your WebEx, and we kindly ask that you enter in your questions there. Oh, trying to scroll to the slide, but it's freezing up on me. But go ahead and enter your questions there. We just simply ask that you, in addition to your question, enter your name, your company, as well as a panelist if you have a specific question to do that. So as you go along, please do that. We will have the Q&A after the presentations, but go ahead and start entering your questions now. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next, we have Dr. Harlan Spence, who is the director of the Institute for the Study of Earth, Oceans, and Space at the University of New Hampshire. Dr. Spence, I'm looking forward to seeing some of the projects you're working on. It was so exciting to be there last summer to see your students and graduate students and how engaged they were and the really innovative studies that are underway there. So I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation and so appreciate your joining us this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Shaheen. We're really happy to be an eager and longstanding partner with NASA on a number of our programs. So let me just dive right in and give you a little summary of what we've been doing. I speak very proudly of this. And I can do that because I've only participated in the last 20% of sort of that 60-year history, which is really quite remarkable at the University of New Hampshire. So I've got a number of numbers I'd like to talk about because I think they express this long and strong partnership with NASA, particularly in the Science Mission Directorate. And a number of leaders across the country are proud Wildcats. They've come through our programs. I'm very happy to learn Glenn is amongst that. So go Wildcats. And this history really goes back to 1960 when we really first started entering the space age early and strong. So currently, UNH is not only involved on 25 active space missions, but is on leadership positions in 25 of those missions. And I think an unusual element of that, UNH being one of many university partners across the country, is in a leadership position on at least one active mission in each of the 4 main divisions of the Science Mission Directorate. So in astrophysics, earth science, heliophysics, and planetary. And so we're quite proud of that distinction. Our strength is in the realm that most people probably have the least knowledge of, and that's called heliophysics. It's really the connection between the sun and the earth. And of the 22 active heliophysics missions now, UNH has leadership positions on 16 of those, so 73, nearly 3/4 of all of the missions. So again, really proud of that leadership. When we add up all of the missions, turns out a number of them have multiple spacecraft. So we're actually involved with 40 active spacecraft, so that's sort of our fleet. And if we add up the number of years of in orbit of those 40 satellites, it's 560 years, cumulative years, just of our active missions. And so if you turn the clock back 560 years, that was year 1460, and it was the year of the War of the Roses, just to put that in context. When we think about the total number of missions, and the chart on the right-hand side there shows the long swoop of history from the lower right swooping up to present of all the missions, and that includes orbital missions. We've had more than 50 missions, and when we include balloons and sounding rockets, these are suborbital, also all launches, another more than 50. When you add those together, on average, we've had 2 launches per year since 1960. And so I think this amply demonstrates the long and continuous record we've had with a really terrific partnership with NASA. We go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, this area called heliophysics is one of our strengths. We have expanded into all 4 domains at NASA Science Mission Directorate, but heliophysics really has been our early and continuous area of strength. And I love this area because it excites both basic research, the plasma physics of the universe, but also it's the realm of space weather. And so if we are to protect our technological society, which is increasingly a large footprint in space, including human exploration, then the science that we are leaders in really are helping to pave the way for exploration. And a really close friend who passed away sadly recently, Mike Wargo, who was at NASA headquarters, always loved to say, and we call it the Wargo axiom, science enables exploration, exploration enables science. And so it's really the yin and the yang. And together, we really can make terrific strides. Just yesterday, I'm privileged to be a principal investigator of an instrument on the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Behind me, you can see an image taken of a crater, Giordano Bruno, from the LRO spacecraft. We celebrated the 11th launch day of LRO just yesterday. We at UNH have leadership on the Cosmic Ray Telescope for the effects of radiation, and that's doing basic science, but it's also characterizing the radiation environment for a safe return to the moon for the first woman and the next man. Looking forward, we're poised to continue this leadership. We have several missions that are in development. IMAP, that's in interstellar mapping and acceleration probe. The second little image there you can see is the Senator and Administrator Bridenstine during their visit, learning about the Glimmer mission from the PI Joe Salisbury, our faculty members, an astrophysics mission of opportunity called LEAP, Ether, and then one we're very excited about as well is the Space Weather Follow-on L1 mission, where we'll be building a magnetometer. So these are all programs we have going on. There are other opportunities for programs where we're developing technologies, and we're always interested in partnerships with small businesses. In the last picture in the lower right, we have facilities on campus that may be of interest to small businesses that could help with synergies with your programs, and we're always looking forward to those kind of opportunities. So thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Bridenstine, for the opportunity to partner with NASA.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spence, and thank you to everyone at UNH who's doing such great research. You know, as I think you heard in the introduction, I sit on the Armed Services Committee, and I really liked what you had to say about the connection between science and exploration, because the science and the exploration that we're learning about space is really critical as we're thinking about what has become a real competition among the great powers in space. And the information is absolutely critical as we think about our future and what's happening with that competition. So it's very exciting to see what you're doing. Now everybody is on, I know, because you also want to know how you can make the same kinds of connections that Creare and UNH are collaborating with NASA. And we have two of the people at NASA who helped to make that happen, who are going to be speaking next on the webinar. Jenn Gustetic is NASA's program executive for the SBIR and STTR programs. Again, you heard a little bit of the history of SBIR and STTR earlier. And of course, Glenn Delgado, who is the Associate Administrator for NASA Office of Small Businesses. So again, we are delighted to have both of you join us this morning to talk about how the small businesses in New Hampshire can form these kinds of partnerships and work on NASA projects. Thank you both.
Happy to be here. I'm Jenn Gustetic. As Senator Shaheen said, I'm the program executive for NASA's SBIR and STTR programs. I want to start by thanking Senator Shaheen for bringing us all together today to talk about how we can encourage New Hampshire small businesses to get more involved with NASA. We at the NASA SBIR and STTR program know just how vitally important small businesses are to NASA's missions and want to extend our most sincere thank you to Senator Shaheen for being a champion of our program through her work as the ranking member of the subcommittee that provides NASA's appropriations, as well as being a leading voice for a long time on the Senate Small Business Committee. So thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Next slide. We're going to cover three big areas today. First, we're going to run through a little bit about what NASA's SBIR program does within NASA and for our small business partners. Second, we'll talk about how we're working with Congress to help our program grow its impact on small businesses in New Hampshire's and around the country. And finally, we'll cover changes that our program has made due to the uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 pandemic to help our small business partners weather the storm. Next slide. I thought we'd start with going over what our program is designed to accomplish. The NASA SBIR and STTR program is tasked with furthering relevant research and building capabilities for NASA, the commercial aerospace industry, and the nation as a whole. We partner with small businesses, those are companies around 500 employees, through the Small Business Innovation Research portion of our program, or SBIR, but we also partner with research institutions like UNH through the Small Business Technology Transfer portion of the program, or STTR. Even though our program technically falls under one of the agency's 4 mission directorates, NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate, we are tied to everything that NASA does in areas like human exploration, space technology, science, and aeronautics. This includes the Artemis mission by helping small businesses get involved in this endeavor. Lunar topics have been and will continue to be a big focus in our annual solicitations, and we are excited to be able to fund more and more small businesses to participate in Artemis as the agency's budget grows. In order to support NASA, we function both as an R&D program and as a seed fund. Let me explain a little bit more about what I mean by that. As an R&D program, we fund the maturation of technologies for which NASA is the primary customer, and we help maintain the aerospace industrial base through those investments. However, we also operate as a seed fund, which is very different. In that capacity, we are investing in disruptive capabilities in emerging markets, increasing the country's competitive advantage, and generating opportunities for job creation across the country. Next slide. Our goal is to introduce new technologies and ideas when and where they're needed most. To find these technologies, we've invested in small businesses and research institutions in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, and we do so throughout the year. For example, later this month on June 30th, we will be announcing our 2020 Phase 1 SBIR and STTR selections, which are awarded to small businesses to establish the merit and feasibility of their proposed innovation. Now, before I dive further into the specifics of our program's awards, I want to note that we are not the only SBIR or STTR program in the federal government. In fact, we are one of 10 SBIR programs that the SBA administers on behalf of the federal government. NASA's annual investments make up just over 5% of the over $3 billion per year that SBIR programs across the government invest in American small businesses. So, of course, we encourage you to look at NASA's program, but you should also be looking at the other agencies' programs as well. Next slide. On this map, you'll see a breakdown of the total number of SBIR and STTR awards listed by state since the program began in 1982, making its first awards in 1983. Over the years, the program has made a total of 320 awards to small businesses in New Hampshire, 308 SBIR and 12 STTR. We're proud of our outreach and other efforts to increase the geographic diversity of participation in our program. We're also proud that our annual average amount has been on the rise. In fact, in the last 2 years, the program has funded an average of $160 million in Phase 1 and Phase 2 contracts to about 500 proposals from small businesses each year. Next slide. I've been talking about the various phases of our program, and I just want to ensure that everyone understands the basics of each phase. I won't go over every detail, but at a high level, Phase 1 is what we like to call the idea phase. Phase 2 is focused on the actual development, demonstration, and delivery of the innovation. It is our goal to help all of our small business participants graduate to Phase 3, when their innovative technologies, products, and services make their way into NASA missions or into the broader commercial marketplace. But to put it plainly, we know getting to a successful Phase 3 is tough. Phase 1 and 2 awards alone are typically not enough to support a company's commercialization journey. So our program has created additional opportunities to help firms get there with more than just funding, through initiatives like the I-Corps program and the 2 post-Phase 2 vehicles you see called out on the slide. I-Corps specifically trains small businesses, sometimes that are more research-minded, to understand how to approach discovering customer needs. This iterative approach to interviewing potential customers helps provide assistance and training to our firms that in turn help them develop better products and grow. Now that we've gone through the basics of our program, let's dive into some examples of what real-world successes have looked like for 2 of our recent awardees from New Hampshire. Next slide. And Bob, I just want to thank you for sharing your experience working with the program. You guys have obviously been a longtime partner and very successful partner with the SBIR program, so thank you for taking the time to share your experience today. I'd like to describe 2 other examples from your state for you all. So the first is Applied Geosolutions. As I mentioned earlier, NASA invests in more than just space, which brings me to my first story. Based in Durham, New Hampshire, the company developed a tool to monitor rice production in real time, allowing farmers to develop crop management plans, and on a larger scale, supplying the data needed to determine risks to this global food staple. The technology, called Rice Decision Support System, or RICE DSS, uses data from a number of different satellites already in orbit. Building on its success with the NASA SBIR program, Applied Geosolutions technology is now being used in Southeast Asia through AgResults, which is a $120 million initiative financed jointly by the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Nanocomp Technologies is another great success story coming out of New Hampshire for the program, and is an example of a company that originally found success with another agency's SBIR program, but caught NASA's attention for its application to our space missions. Originally funded by the Air Force, NASA awarded Nanocomp a 2014 Phase 3 contract to use the company's nanotube materials to replace heavier materials on spacecrafts. Nanocomp Technologies makes its product in never before available macro formats, enabling NASA to construct payloads that weigh less and perform better. The technology also has several potential commercial applications, and customers like Boeing and Lockheed Martin are already purchasing from Nanocomp for their specialized needs. If you want to know more about each of these companies' success stories or journeys through the SBIR program, you can find their full success stories on our program's website. Next slide. Whether it's helping our successful companies find partnerships with other NASA offices, other agencies, or within the larger economy, our program knows that we are not alone in the business of supporting space-related companies. We rely on Congress to help our program, and therefore our small businesses grow through a variety of legislative authorities offered to us. For those of you who may not be familiar, our program is authorized by the Small Business Committee and is set to expire in 2022. One of the most important things that past reauthorizations has given us is flexibility, including the Administrative Pilot Program, which is sometimes referred to as the 3%. For example, the I-Corps program that I mentioned earlier is funded through the 3%. We also use this funding to conduct a lot of outreach, including participation in the SBIR Road Tour that is put on with other SBIR programs to target underrepresented states. The Road Tour last visited New Hampshire in 2018, and we know they hope to return to the state in the near future. Our program is also a regular participant in another road tour, the NASA HBCU MSI Technology Infusion Road Tour. This series provides an open platform for representatives of historically Black colleges and universities and minority serving institutions to learn about the SBIR program and other NASA offerings. Additionally, we use this to put on an annual industry day that this year will be completely virtual, and we will welcome as many participants from New Hampshire to join us. But there's still more flexibility that would be useful, especially as we seek to include more small businesses in the Artemis mission. As such, last year, NASA submitted 2 legislative proposals to the Hill, which are briefly described on this slide. These flexibilities offer the ability to get larger dollar value awards to small businesses more quickly, specifically to enable them to meaningfully contribute to Artemis in the near and medium term. NASA continues to work on the best path forward for these legislative proposals, and we're happy to work with any of the staff on the call today that are interested in discussing these further. Next slide, and my last one. Finally, we recognize that COVID-19 is posing hardship for many small businesses across the country, and our program has taken proactive steps to address the needs of our vital small business research and development community. As an example, we extended the phase 1 due date this spring by 1 month, from March 20th to April 20th, to give the firms more time to prepare their proposals. With this delay, we actually saw a 14% increase in proposals this year and have worked hard to streamline our internal processes so we didn't have to delay funding by the full month. Next slide. So on this slide, you'll actually see my email. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I'll make sure to route you to the right people to get your question answered after today's webinar. If there's something you can't find on the website too, also feel free to reach out to me. And now I turn it over to Glenn Delgado. Thank you for the time.
Well, thank you, Jen. I appreciate the introduction. And again, I just want to say thank you to the Senator and to Administrator Bridenstine for the opportunity to talk to you. And as it's been mentioned a few times, yes, I'm a UNH grad and go Wildcats. I was actually stationed up in Pease Air Force Base for quite a number of years. And that's where the transition went to going to UNH, because at the time, UNH's School of Health Studies was ranked, I believe, number 2 in the nation. And since I was a nurse already, it seemed like a natural fit to go over there. And I had a very good time at the University of New Hampshire. And now it's time to give back a little bit. So, and Senator, I do appreciate you being on the Small Business Committee. The committee helps us out tremendously, and we look forward to your continued support. And as the administrator said, yeah, we've been doing very, very well. And if you go to the next chart, but none of that would be possible without support from the A-suite, as we call it, the administrator and his team, because without buy-in from the top, the program, won't be as successful. But the support that the administrator has been doing, as well as all the mission support directorates at NASA and the Office of Procurement, make my job kind of easy, and I really do appreciate it. But if you can look at the chart, you can see over just the last 4 fiscal years, we've gone up about 23%, which equates to about over $500 million more to the small businesses that interact with NASA, that do business with us. And again, a lot of that's because we are the ones who try to find the small businesses and make a connection to our mission directorates and to STMD and those guys that they can nurture those requirements that they have to make our mission successful. But you can see we have a very steady climb going up. And to me, over a 4-year period, increasing dollars awarded to small business over $500 million is a big deal. Our saying at NASA is small business is big business. And we demonstrate it by the numbers. We just don't talk it, we do it. Go to the next slide. And then this is something too, it's common knowledge that we are going back to the moon and out to Mars, and there aren't a lot of small businesses that can do that directly for us. So we also really work very hard with our large prime contractors, the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the SpaceXs, to be continued, to make sure that they have a very solid subcontracting program. So where they find the technologies that the small businesses have, and they supplement that with theirs to make sure that our NASA missions are complete, with all the technology they need. Because if you think about it, small businesses actually hold more patents than large businesses do. So they are truly the innovators of the ones for the technology that we need, and sometimes that we don't even know we need until we see it demonstrated by the small businesses to help make our mission successful. So again, as you can see there, they've actually even done a little bit better than we have. We did like a 23-24% increase over the last 5 years. They've gone up 28%, and they're at an increase of over $655 billion more to the small business that they use to support our missions. So we do it on both levels, not only prime, but also working with our large primes for subcontracting opportunities. We can go to the next slide. Okay, now just to give you an idea, these are our top 20 large prime contractors for fiscal year 20 that we're working with now. The top one you see is JPL, which is to us technically a contractor, but they are a quasi NASA agency. They're FFRDC, which is a federally funded research and development, but you guys know them as JPL, and for the most part, everybody considers them part of NASA. But then you see Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, Jacobs, and SpaceX, then going down the line. So if you're really looking for opportunities, this is where most of our money goes. So you can look for subcontracting opportunities with them. I'll explain a little bit how to do that going down the line. Next slide. You can see here is our top 20 NAICS codes. For most of the people that are in business, they know what NAICS codes are, but the Department of Commerce classifies each item of industry by what you do with the NAICS code. So you can see like NASA spends the majority of their money on research and development, which makes sense because that's what we do. Okay, but you can see there's 1,000 other things that we do. We buy everything just like every other agency, from facilities to computer to administrative support to ground maintenance, engineering services, financial services. So we're not just all R&D, but you can look, that is the majority, $8 billion, and then the next is like at $2 billion. So that is where a lot of our stuff is, and that's why we do look for the small businesses, again, because they do hold the patents, they do have the technology, and that's what we need to make NASA successful of putting the first woman and the next man on the moon and up into Mars. So you can take a look at those. Remember, these slides will be available, so you don't have to write down everything very quickly. Go to the next slide. Now I'm going to focus just a little bit on New Hampshire itself. You see in FY20, which again, we're just a little over halfway through the year, we've already have obligated over $17 million into the state, and of that, 5.2 has gone to small business, which is 31%, which is over the statutory limit of that the SBA gives us of 23%. So we are doing very well, and you can look at FY19 and FY18. Again, we did about 43 million in 19 and about 33 million in 18. And again, it shows that we're climbing up on the ladder, and we've been doing about 42% of the dollars that we award in New Hampshire to small businesses. So again, we are focused up there. We're looking to make sure that we can find partnerships that can help us be successful, because when you're successful, we're successful, and we're trying to make those matches with all of our different missions. We have science on the line, I believe. We have space tech. We have HEO. So we have all the different focuses, and we try to make sure that we can match the small businesses with the requirements of those mission directorates. Next slide. Now I'll focus just a little bit on Artemis. You heard the administrator and Jen talk about it also. There's a couple of major programs on there, And I just wanted to give you an idea. This list is not inclusive. You heard the administrator talk about 15 of the companies. I'm just going to list a few of them. And to date, we've already done over $405 million to small business just under the Artemis program. A lot of it would get under the commercial lunar payload services, or CLPS. You can see each of those small businesses that are there. We listed a couple of dollar values under some of those, and you can see they're not small dollars. Astrobotics Technology, they got a task order for over $50 million, and another one for almost $200 million for the separate task order. You go down to Intuitive Machines, they've received a contract or a task order for over $77 million. Maston Space Systems, another $76 million. Okay, so they're not small dollars, but these guys are contributing their technology to our large, actually as primes themselves, to make sure that we can get our missions completed. Next slide. And to continue, these are the large primes that are actually holding a lot of the contracts too. So if you're interested in working on the Artemis program, you can look at Blue Origin, Sierra Nevada, of course, SpaceX, which had the very successful launch recently to take off the humans from the U.S. soil for the first time in over 10 years, which is a major milestone. We have Draper Labs and Lockheed Martin. Now, another one program underneath Artemis is called the Human Landing Systems Contract. It was just recently awarded in May of this year. The winners, but the people that received contracts were Blue Origin again, Kinetics, and of course, SpaceX. So if you're looking for subcontracting work, these would be the people that you really want to focus on, but you got to understand what they're looking for, and you got to make sure you go to the right people to match your needs. You know, what you're selling is what they actually are looking for to require. Or if you know something that you have that they might not have thought of, which does happen, I won't say quite frequently, but often enough, I've heard success stories that way. Go make your proposal to them, and I'll tell you how to do that in 1 second. Okay, then the other major ones underneath Artemis are the Lunar Gateway, and then also Habitations and Logistics Outpost. And we go to the next slide. We'll get there. There we go. Now, you saw me talk about the subcontracting numbers earlier. Okay, now the relevance of subcontracting at NASA, as I stated previously, there's not a whole lot of small businesses that can take the lead to get us to Mars and to the moon, back to the moon. However, we need them to have their technology available to our large primes and working with our large primes. For instance, the Orion program, which is headed by Lockheed Martin, to this date, there are over 2,000 small business subcontractors working on that program. And they've been awarded over $1.7 billion since 2006. The Space Launch System, which is the rockets that are going to be able to lift us up there. Of course, they've been going, again, we have over 2,000 small businesses doing it. They've been awarded at least $1.8 billion in subcontracts under this. You know, and a lot of small businesses are like, yeah, I'd rather be the prime, you know, because I can control things better. But guess what? As a sub, if you're not ready, this helps build you. Okay, it builds up your past performance with both the NASA people that watch you do the work, because they're the ones seeing your work being done. It builds up your credibility with them. So when it's time for you to be able to prime, you'll have that opportunity because you are known. Just like everything else, you usually only do business with people you know. You just don't walk up to somebody on the street and ask, hey, can you do work with me? Okay, so you have to build relationships, and this is a great way of getting it done. So, and as I showed you on my second chart over $3 billion a year go from our large primes to our small businesses. So again, we take care of business, literally. Next slide. There you go. And this would be my last real talking slide. The importance of this is, and this is true at every federal agency, you got to start with the small business specialist at that agency. So at NASA, we have one in each of our 10 centers. You got to build a relationship with them because they're the ones that know who have the requirements at that particular center. They know who to build relationships with. They know who to put you in front of so that you can do your pitch. Okay, you got to do your homework though. And the second bullet there, you build your relationship with it's called the Industry Small Business Liaison Office at the large prime level. So every one of them has a SBLO, as we call them. You get to meet them, you talk to them, and then they can put you in front of who they need to at their companies. Okay, skip through a little of this stuff, but you know, each NASA center has a different mission. They have a variety of mixed products and services. So you got to find the right one to go pitch to. Okay, and you can read the rest of that down through there. Another key thing there is youth trade associations. There's a trade association for women-owned businesses, for hub-zone businesses, for service-disabled vets. So find those trade organizations and utilize them. And the key thing to this all too is before any federal agency awards a contract, they do what's called the sources sought synopsis or request for information. And that tells them who's interested in it. So if we don't get replies from small business that say, I'm interested in it, it ends up going as a large business, full and open competition. And then of course, 5 minutes later, we get all the calls from small business saying, but we could do that. Why didn't you set it aside? Because you didn't answer the mail. So always answer the mail. It gives us the tools to be able to set it aside for small business. And next slide, so I can get done and get questions and answers in. This map, all you have to do is click on any of the hyperlinks in it. It'll show you all 10 NASA centers. They give you the phone number and name of each of the small business specialists there and their email address so they're easy to reach and get in touch with. And next slide. And this is gives you an idea of what each of the NASA centers do. We have our research centers, we have our space centers, we have our science center, which is Goddard, and then again, JPL. And then we have an NSSC, basically a shared services center, which does a lot of our transactional stuff. They do a lot of the simplified acquisition, personnel movements and stuff like that. So, and again, here's the name, phone numbers, and email links to each and every one of them. So if you need to reach out, you have that information available. And I think my last slide, if we can get to that one. There's a link to the NASA website, our small business office website. You can get all of this information from there. Just to do one quick plug, our OSBP mobile app, we have the only federal agency with a mobile app out of the Apple and I'm trying to remember the other store, but the Google store, as I'll call it, where you can download our app and it'll give you all this information right on your phone or your tablet also. Okay, and with that, again, I'll say thank you to the Senator and Administrator Bridenstine. And again, we wouldn't be able to do this without both of your supports. And as you can see, I'm trying to make the best of all your support that you give me. And thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Glenn, and to Jen as well. We are going to go to the Q&A session, and Robert is going to moderate that. But if you share with us those PowerPoints, we will make sure that they go out to everybody who's on today's webinar. So you'll have that information. It was a lot of good information, really helpful. And if we have it in a form that we can share, then people can go back and refer to that. So thank you both very much. And Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you to moderate the Q&A.
Okay, we'll go ahead and begin. The first question is from Jen from David Kovar. We have an existing completed U.S. Air Force SBIR Phase 2. Due to COVID-related issues, our U.S. Air Force Phase 3 partner has no funding to continue. We are thus, New Hampshire could easily benefit from some help funding other USG customers. Who could we work with us on this SBIR Phase 3?
Hi, thanks for the question, David. For any of the companies that are on the webinar today that have questions about navigating NASA's specific SBIR process, one of the things that we do is we have Center Technology Transition Representatives, CTTLs, at each of the centers, kind of like Glenn mentioned, the small business reps that they also have at each of the NASA centers. We'll get you in touch with the right CTTL depending on your capability area to help you explore what some potential options might be. But if you reach out to me afterwards, my email was on the last slide. I'll also put it up in the chat so everybody has it. We'd be happy to get you connected with someone that can have an offline conversation with you.
The next question is for Administrator Bridenstine. It's from Susie Brickford from New England UAB. Mission is to increase STEM opportunities using drone technology. We are especially focused on girls in STEM careers. I was wondering if NASA had partner opportunities to interest girls in STEM careers.
We do. We do a number of things to get young people involved in STEM. We have internships, which are very exciting. In fact, we had a high school intern last summer this was a high school intern that discovered a planet orbiting a binary star system, and it was his third day on the job. So those are the kind of things that it will change somebody's life. If you intern at NASA, it will change your life. It inspires people. It encourages people. But certainly we have opportunities there. We have the Office of STEM Engagement, which is involved from K through college, really, and the whole purpose of the Office of STEM Engagement is to engage our young people in what NASA is doing and our missions. We have EPSCoR, and we have the Space Program, and these are programs that go to universities to encourage universities to get involved in our missions. And when universities get involved, their students get involved. The University of New Hampshire is probably one of the best at this. So there's opportunities there for Space Grant, and then EPSCoR, which gets some universities resources. I guess Space Grant is for students, EPSCoR is to get universities engaged in NASA's missions. So yes, there are a number of different programs that we have focused on that next generation. But I'll tell you, the biggest thing that I think we do that is most important is accomplishing those stunning achievements. When we launch astronauts, when we land astronauts on the moon, when we land robots on Mars, the world sees that and it inspires everybody. And so, we do have those programs. And of course, you can go to the NASA website and there's all kinds of material there.
Unmute, please, Robert.
Next question. This is for Jen, and we are new the SBIR system programs, and would like to know if there is someone here in New Hampshire we can work with directly to get trained, assist in guiding us through the SBIR process.
Yes, thank you for that question. In addition to the CTTLs that I would be happy to introduce folks to get a NASA-specific 101, there also are great resources that the SBA offers locally through the Small Business Development Centers in your state. Those are SBA-funded offices that exist to help small businesses figure out how to navigate the federal government. So for those folks who aren't aware of those resources outside of NASA's Small Business Office, those are a great place to go also to find additional free resources to work through to understand better federal government contracting processes for small businesses.
Thanks, Jen. You're right. The SBDCs do a great job here in New Hampshire. You can also contact our office. We can put you in touch with SBIR programs across the federal government. It's one of the things that our business, our folks, staff folks who work with businesses do as well. So between us, we got you covered.
Okay. In addition to Jen here, we also have on the line Jim Reuter from NASA's STMD and Dr. Zerback from the SMD, Science Mission Director from NASA, and also available to answer questions for you. Jen, looks like you are a very popular person this morning. Next question is for you as well, and is the program available to companies that have less than 12 employees? This is from Barbara Archback from Future Plus Systems.
Yeah, great question. Actually, the near majority of our awardees every year come from companies that have less than, I believe it's less than, definitely the majority of our companies come from companies less than 50, but a significant chunk of our awardees come from companies that have less than 20 employees. So we at NASA work with a lot of not just small businesses, but small businesses. So certainly if you have less than 12 employees, that is not a hindrance at all to your ability to apply and be successful in our program.
Okay, and the next question is for Bob Kline-Schoder from Creare, from Diane Rush, owner of New Hampshire Controls Incorporated in Dover. And she would like to know if Creare has a list of specifications for local small businesses that could they could access?
Yes, Diane, thanks for that question. We do. It would probably be specific or to a particular program that we might be working on. So it'd probably be best if you contacted me. If you go to our website, you can send a question or information and just address it to me, and then I'll get back to you with the details.
And this will be the last question for the night. And again, it's for Jen, and it's from Tosin Davis. And they would like to know, do you have a list of RFIs, RFPs, and SBIR proposals coming down the pike in support of Artemis?
Great question. So typically our annual solicitation comes out in January. We are looking at accelerating the release of the next solicitation, specifically in the current funding context with the COVID-19 pandemic. So stay tuned for when our next solicitation comes out from the SBIR program. And a large amount of the subtopics or problem statements that are in that annual solicitation do relate to the Moon to Mars activities for the agency. So that's something to keep your eyes peeled for, the next opportunity to apply if you're brand new for the SBIR program. But another thing I highly recommend all of you do if you're not already doing this is to go to our website, sbir.nasa.gov, and join our distribution list so you get our newsletter that comes out every other month. We not only feature news in the SBIR world, but also will amplify other funding opportunities in the Space Technology Mission Directorate. For example, when the Flight Opportunities Program releases competitive opportunities to demonstrate suborbital flight test opportunities for your technologies, and other opportunities like the Tipping Point and ACO solicitations that are ways in which small businesses get into other programs in the Space Technology Mission Directorate. So highly encourage folks to subscribe to that newsletter because it will keep you informed of many of those opportunities that are relevant to small businesses from the space tech perspective.
I want to thank you all for the questions you had, and sorry we didn't have enough time to get through all the questions. However, all the questions that were asked, we will go ahead and provide responses to all the attendees today. At this point in time, I'd like to turn it back to Administrator Bridenstine, who would provide us some closing remarks.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say what an honor it is to be here. And thank you to Senator Shaheen for all of her leadership, not just on space exploration, but also small business opportunities, and making sure that NASA is doing the right things by small business. I want to say a few things that I heard today that I took away that are critically important. Creare mentioned thermal vacuum pumps and the ability to find methane on other planets. This is so important for a whole lot of reasons. When we think about the last 2 years, I've been at NASA just over 2 years now. We've discovered that Mars actually has a methane cycle. When we think about Mars having a methane cycle, that could be an indicator that there is life on Mars. That methane cycle is commensurate with the seasons of Mars. So the probability of finding life, I'm talking about microbial life on another world, continues to go up. Is it there? I don't know, but maybe it could be. And when we think about what that discovery would mean, the idea that a small business in New Hampshire was building products that enabled us to make those discoveries, that's a really big deal. That discovery, should it ever be made, that will change history. It will define how we do space exploration and what we're looking for in the future. He also mentioned cryogenics, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. When we go to the surface of the moon, the next man and the first woman, when we go to the surface of the moon, we're going to need to be able to store not just liquid oxygen, which I think we've pretty much mastered at this point, but liquid hydrogen. That's really, really difficult. We're talking about a lot of pressure and a tremendous amount of cooling that goes into that. And so when we have these small businesses doing these things, it's going to be transformational, not just for the science, but also for humans expanding their presence into our own solar system. So that's important as well. Finally, Senator Shaheen mentioned it. Harlan also mentioned it. Space enables exploration. Exploration enables science. So I should say science enables exploration. Exploration enables science. The University of New Hampshire is doing that. When we send humans to the moon and onto Mars, we have to understand the sun. Because a solar flare or a coronal mass ejection could be tremendously damaging to our astronauts. So we need to understand how to protect them, but we also need to be able to predict those events. The work that's happening at the University of New Hampshire from a heliophysics perspective is going to inform how we're able to make those predictions. So science that is being done at the University of New Hampshire is absolutely going to enable the exploration of humans deeper into the solar system than ever before. So there's so much more that's happening there in New Hampshire, but just hearing those things excites me, and I'm thrilled to wish I could be there in person. Senator Shaheen, if you ever invite me to the state of New Hampshire when we get past the pandemic, I'll be there. You guys have some amazing things going on, and I look forward to that eventuality. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, for bringing your NASA team to show what amazing work is going on there and the connections between that work and our small businesses in New Hampshire and how critical they are to, just like businesses across the country, to NASA's mission. And as you point out, the foundation of all of this is science. And looking at the science, being driven by the science is so critical as we're thinking about innovation and technology and what's happening in the future. So thank you, to your team, to Dean Spence, or Director Spence. I'm sorry, Dr. Spence, I keep thinking you're a dean rather than a director. And to Bob Kline-Schoder, and to all of the businesses who participated this morning. It is amazing to think of the innovation, the interest, the excitement, and the energy that's out there. And we want to do everything we can to ensure that you can connect with NASA and with SBIR and STTR on the work that's being done. So again, there are lots of ways to connect. We will get you information from today's webinar, and we can help connect you with folks just like Jen and the folks at NASA, our SBDCs. So we hope that we're going to see lots of innovation, lots of successes that come out of this webinar. And Jim, we're going to take a rain check and bring you back as soon as we get through this pandemic.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes today's event.